Right, so hi, I'm Gregory. I run Witching Hours Studios. Basically what we do is that we try to tell stories and give people an enjoyable experience. Now, the interesting thing about game making is that we focus so much on solving problems that we are not quite sure how we are actually going through the process of doing something like that. So firstly, hi, I'm Gregory, and depending on who you talk to, I would like to tell you that I am not a hat-wearing Uber driver because my friends are assholes. Alright? So, what are we here to talk about? We are actually here to talk about communication. What is this voodoo nonsense? The truth of the matter is that we spend a lot of time in the office talking to people. But how much of that actually gets through really depends on you. So what I present to you here is very much this instead. These are my mistakes, my sins, and my regrets, because the truth of the matter is that the only way I have anything to share with you is to have experienced it. And more often than not, experience is a very, very painful teacher, right? So whatever I'm talking about here are things that are mistakes I've already created, already made, and I've hurt people already. So do not assume that I'm coming from a very academic point of view. I'm telling you that this is what scientists say, this is what 20 game developers say. This comes from a very personal place because I think that this is a real issue in game development. Right. The biggest single problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. Just because you spent some time exchanging words with somebody does not mean that anything was communicated. This is the assumption that a lot of people make. This is the assumption a lot of game developers make when they're talking about ideas especially. Because just because you have the most fantastic idea in your head, if you are unable to convey it to another person, that idea is absolutely worthless. Right? So communication 101, we got to go through exactly what it means to communicate before we can take apart, the very important bits that matter to us. Right? The mix. These are the things that are required for proper communication. A sender is a person that has an idea that they want to convey. And when I say an idea, I don't mean a creative thing. It's just basically, basically what they have in their head, right? It can be everything from how they're feeling to what they're thinking to an actual instruction. For example, if you are talking to an artist and you want to say, you would say, draw me a house, and then you tell them how you want the house to feel. But if you're talking to a programmer, you're going to tell the programmer, draw me a box 3 cm by 3 cm and a triangle on top that has a, that sits on top of this thing. So they are looking for more exactness. So that's with regards to the sender. You have a receiver, someone that's trying to understand what you're trying to say. Notice I use the word trying to understand. Because just because they're sitting there doesn't mean they actually know. Then you have the message, the core of what you're trying to put across. You have the medium, right? In this case, it's Twitter. And then you have a result. So here's what I conveyed to you. I have a bunch of slides that you're looking at. Can I just ask for a show of hands? How many of you think that the slides are the medium? Can you put up your hands? All right? So a few of you think that that's the medium. Okay? Here's the thing. That's not the medium. That's the message. I am the medium. That's why you're here to listen to me. If that was the medium, I would just send that to you. You don't need to sit here and listen to me ramble on. Knowing how to separate what a message and a medium is means that you'll be more capable of actually transferring the information that you need. Right? There are 4 main parts for conversation to reach a point where communication has been successful. The first one, this is a very Western idea, assertiveness. That means the ability to sound as though you know what the hell you're talking about. And you are certain that what you're saying has some truth that you can use. Alright? If you sound weak, if you sound unsure, right, it devalues it devalues your message. Right? So if I tell you guys like, hi, I think the box is too big. Do I really think the box is too big? Do you believe me when I say it like that? Or I tell you the box is too big. Go fix it. Right? Things like that matter. So assertiveness plays a part in whether your communication is well received. The next one is clarity. If you cannot clearly explain what you're trying to say, right, then you have a problem. I'll give you an example. More often than not, lots of arguments in the office or in real life in general, right? It's about not having anything to peg a criteria to. So, for example, I want to change the name of my company, and then I'm having a conversation with everybody about changing the name of a company. So the conversation is about changing the name, but there is no criteria, right? There's nothing to peg it to. So there is no clarity. But if I say that I have name A, which is what we currently have, and I intend to propose name B, you have something to compare these two things to. And then you have a proper conversation about it. But if you're just talking about the idea of something, as in, should we do something or not, it goes nowhere. Right? So being able to clearly define what it's all about, clarity is very, very important. The next bit is the part that we're not so good at. It's actually listening. Why is this so important even though you are the person that's trying to send a message? Let's think about that. Oh, one more thing before I talk about listening. Here's the thing about assertiveness. Assertiveness is a very, let's be honest, a very Western ideal. That means, right, that you're tying something beyond just the message in with your messaging. Your ego, your certainty, all that you are, right, is pegged to what you're talking about. That means that if somebody attacks your message, you are going to take it personally. This is a very big problem, especially with a very male-dominant industry. We peg our ego to our message far too often. And that's why you always have arguments that sometimes go nowhere because you're feeling attacked when you're giving out a message. Another part about assertiveness is that it connects it conveys a very different message, because this is my mistake. I am by nature a very assertive person, and sometimes that works against what I'm trying to do. What do I mean by this? If my staff comes to me and goes, should we change the position of the character? And I go, yes, we should change the position of the character. I am certain that this is a good idea. What does that do? That means that I am taking on the responsibility of the success or failure of that message, right? That also means, right, that if what I chose failed and my staff come back to me and go like, Ian, you screwed up, that thing was terrible. And then they follow up, that's the logical, correct thing to say, but they follow up with this other bit that is very painful, and they go, I trusted you. You sounded like you knew what you were saying. And yet somehow still we screwed up. How will I trust you again? Assertiveness is a double-edged sword. You can sound like you know exactly what you're doing, but you're going to suffer for it if it does not work. So I challenge this. And I say, let's not talk about assertiveness. Let's not go through that mentality. Let's talk about being informational. That means, right, when you are giving a piece of information, instead of asserting your ego or your personality, right, onto the message, you are trying to go, it would be interesting if we could try this. Word choice, right? If I put myself behind the word I'm trying to say, that means that I'm associating myself with the message. But sometimes the message should be neutral. And when you're being informational, you can also tailor to disciplines. Like the example I gave you between talking to an artist and talking to a programmer. A programmer requires different kinds of information than an artist. Because when you are assertive, right, there is no criteria that you're pegging it to, save for the fact that you think it's right. That's a very, very dangerous stance to take. So, going beyond that, let's talk about listening. Even though you are speaking, even though that's the thing that you're supposed to be all about, listening has far more weight than actually talking. I love this quote. Silence is one of the greatest arts of conversation. If you find yourself talking more than 50 to 60% in a conversation where you're trying to convey a message, that means that that person is not necessarily engaging you. Because if your message has merit and they're interested, they should be asking you questions. Right? So likewise, how often have we been in a conversation with someone and we're not actually listening, no, we're there, and you can see when a person does this, their eye kind of flickers and they're thinking about how they're going to respond to you already. Right? This happens way more often than we're proud of. Usually this comes from a state of insecurity. Usually when someone's attacked and they reach this state, or they feel as though they won't get a chance to actually address those things. There's actually a term for this. This one is where I throw in a bit of science. It's called rehearsing. That means, right, your brain state is in the future and not in the current space. That means you're thinking about what you're going to say when that person stops talking, but you're not actually listening to that person anymore. If you've ever been in a meeting, any kind of development meeting, right, there's always that one guy. And if you don't have that one guy, you're that guy. Okay? This is one of those things that it's not something that you actively think about. But if you're taking apart something someone says previously versus what they're exactly saying right now, you're in trouble. And that's the problem. We are natural problem solvers. So whenever somebody says something that we don't like or we disagree with, we see that message as the problem that needs to be solved. Right? So that means, if let's say someone says, I don't like the fact that you made the characters' clothes lime green. Right? But lime green is your favorite color. So instead of wondering what the player would like, you are filtering through your own thoughts, right? And then you get defensive. But lime green makes the character stand out a lot more. Also, study shows that lime green, right? Because it's eye-catching, right? It makes the player a lot easier to run through, especially because we're making a multiplayer game where the eye needs to track too many pieces of information. Bullshit, right? You just like lime green. Okay, so that's the separation that you got to make when you talk about messaging. So, active listening. Active listening is a way to stop you from making that mistake. So these are steps that you can actually take. So I'm not giving you some voodoo thing that you can't actually use. What do these things mean? Listen for message content. Sometimes what a person says directly is not the content of the message. You need to be able to read in between the lines. And you can't do that if you're not paying attention to what the person is saying. Right? Second one is that you listen for the feelings. This is why you should always have these kind of conversations in person and not through text. If you are doing this through text, you are going to miss a big chunk of the message. Right? Because sometimes when someone's conveying an idea to you, they're also conveying an emotion. How do they feel about the thing that they are talking about? If I'm telling you that I think that we should have more range characters, and I really think we should have more range characters, it's going to be really cool if you have all these things flying around. Versus, I guess you could add more range characters and we'll see how it goes. Right? You lose that in text. If you're in a relationship, you know where this goes, right? You say something, and the person completely doesn't catch what you're saying. So this is why, if it's an important thing, please talk to the person face to face. I see this in my own office. I have people literally sitting across from each other, and they will type to each other, right? It's depressing, and it's actually kind of slower as well, because sometimes I see them, they type, and then they need to clarify, when they could just clarify across the table. So respond to feelings. Now, this is the one part where it's also quite important, is that you need to acknowledge that the person's feeling that way. There are a few ways to do that. Nod your head, okay. Share, mirror the emotion a little bit, right? To go like, if they're excited, get excited. If they're sad, understand why they're saying, and figure out how that goes. But the last part is the most important part. Pause and ask them, do they actually mean what you have in your head? This does three things. It breaks your own train of thought, right, about what you want to respond to, and you are actually repeating to yourself what you think the person is saying. You are confirming the information. That means there's no way you're oh wow, it's 5 minutes already? Alright, very good. Alright, so there is no way to tell, there's the only way to tell whether you're on the right track. So moving on very quickly. So this is the hard bit. This is the bit that if you want to take a slide, take the next slide, okay? So the next slide is this. The success of your communication comes from the other person's response, not your intention. This is in every relationship. Just because you intend to give out a message doesn't necessarily mean that you have successfully communicated something. If a person does not receive what you're saying, the onus is on you to get it right. There are many ways. There's a much longer talk that I could do about that, about actually reading the cues and all that. But what it boils down to is this. If a person didn't receive a message, it's your fault. It's not the person's fault for not listening to you. Because you have not tailored your message to the person. Okay? Your intention means nothing. So if you tell me that, oh, I feel bad, right? I don't give a damn. It's not about feeling bad. It's about whether your message is received. Okay? I love this article. 5 ways you're accidentally making everyone hate you. So this was quite illuminating for me because lots of people don't like me. I'm pretty certain of this. I've seen confirmation of this. In fact, I've been told to my face that they don't like me. And I could not be happier because at least then I know that they're not liking me. But this article covers, a very different section of people where you just don't know. And what I love is the last point that they had is this. You assume because you're okay, everyone else is okay. And you go about your daily life quite happily, just doing the thing that you do. Yes, I can go complain to the other people and go like, if you're not telling the person why they're doing something wrong, right? They're going to keep doing it. But they're kind of self-aware, but that's on their part and it's their choice. But you as a speaker, you as a communicator, you as the leader, right? You can't make this assumption. You need to double check. After you've given an instruction or spoken to somebody, you go back and check again. It could have been as simple as, is everything all right? Believe me, if they feel something, they give them an opportunity, they will tell you. Right? So, that's the last bit, empathy. It's not about you. A lot of people, need to say something. But what's the point if you're going to stand there and say something that no one is listening to? Okay? So you'll meet a lot of people like that. They want to say something and they're not bothered about who's listening. They're very loud, they're very noisy, but at the end of the day, they accomplish nothing because they don't get people buying into their idea. Alright? Yeah. So it's a very simple thing, right? I'm going to go into Q&A because I think this is more of a conversation than a talk. But what it boils down to is that if you want something from somebody, you need to actually give them what they want as well. So that means in communication, losing is actually winning. And that's hard for guys to get their heads around. Women get this a lot better than us guys. Go talk to them. They figured it out. Alright? So if that's the case, then I think I'll just take some questions. Yeah? Okay, so anybody? Yes, question over here.
Thank you. For Masquerada, you worked with American voice actors. Was the communication process more complicated? Were there other challenges as well as besides what you already mentioned?
So we solved that problem by the very fact that we were there. So myself, my co-founder Brian, and our writer Nicholas actually spent a month in LA, right? Talking through with all the voice actors exactly what we wanted to convey. It also helps the three of us are functionally westernized as well. So there was no cultural divide. And as you can tell, I can actually speak English, so that helps quite a bit. But past that point, I think the biggest issues was actually in the vocabulary, right? So more often than not, when you're talking to an actor, their goals are very different from what you'd want to convey. So this is a question about voice acting, I assume, right? So when you're talking to a voice actor, you need to provide the state of mind of what is going on in that character's head as compared to what you want to get out of the voice actor. So that means we are looking for two very, very different things. On the one side, I want the player to feel as though this character is an asshole. But the voice actor wants to know why he's an asshole, right? So that's how you try and connect the two. So when you're trying to explain a character to a voice actor, right, you're going through the person's motivation, right? And that's where you talk about, listening and understanding whether the voice actor understands it. And one thing good about actually being there is that we can actually see it executed and then kind of jump in and see what's going on. So after that month, we came back. We actually dialed in Skype to just hear what's going on, see what's going on. But I can tell you that the time difference was very painful. Yeah. So there weren't problems. It's just that you have to recognize that what you and the listener are trying to do is that you're trying to get different things out of each other. So when you clearly define that, it's going to be a lot easier. I hope that answers your question. Yep. Anyone else?
Can you be too mechanical? Because this requires a lot of self-awareness. And when you're listening to somebody, right, but you're also thinking about how to follow these steps, then does that like in any way contradict the desire for active listening when you're actually spending more effort trying to actively listen versus listening?
So that is a down payment. All right? When you're talking about receiving any new skills, right, there is a process and there is a learning curve. So, I don't know whether you guys have heard this, but basically, if you are unaware of your incompetence, you don't know what you're doing. You're doing something wrong, you don't know that you're doing it wrong. This part where we're at is where I'm making you aware of an incompetence, right? After a while, you're going to be very aware that you're competent if you keep practicing. And then at the end of it, right, you're going to be unaware that you're competent about it and you're just going to do it naturally. So yes, it is mechanical, it is painful, and you might lose exactly what you're trying to get out of certain conversations. But that is the price you pay to be a better person a year from now, or staying in the current state that you are. Do you want to receive only 30% of your message now, right? Forever? Or do you want to sometimes get like maybe 20, 15%, but you can get up to 90% down the road? Any kind of life skill is an investment. It's painful, it is uncomfortable. Communication skills are the worst because it hits us very personally. So yes, it's very mechanical, it's going to be painful, but if you keep doing it, you're going to stop thinking about it, and you're just going to naturally do it. Anything I show to you here, I don't expect you guys to immediately capture or immediately get right. It's going to hurt. And if it doesn't hurt, then you're not doing it right. Okay, questions? Anyone else?
Well, she laughed because she really appreciates your last sentence. If it's not hurt, you didn't do it right.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I think that, okay, for me to stand up before all of you and give a talk, it is not my natural disposition. I'm actually a very introverted person. I would very much spend my time right now at home curled up in bed with a book, rather than stand in front of a bunch of people and go like, I actually know what I'm talking about. It is not my natural inclination. I still feel discomfort. But with regards to that, with regards to Gwen's question also, there are two kinds of conversations. One is public speaking, which is what I'm doing to you. This is not how I talk to normal people. The second one is actually ad hoc speaking. Ad hoc speaking, it's really very much its own talk by itself, because more often than not, you're called to give a response to things. So being able to process the information and respond to it is also a different part. So whatever we're talking about here is more in line with ad hoc speaking, being able to respond to a situation then and there. It's not about public speaking. That's another talk altogether. Yeah? Any other questions? I think one more question.
Hello?
Yes.
So I really agree with when you mentioned about active listening. So my question is, maybe you can share, how do you encourage your teammate to be speaking? Because I have a situation that I really want to listen to my team, but then they are shy and quiet. So at the end of the day, then they will just agree to whatever I say. Thank you.
So that's a very good question actually, because I suffer that as well. This is a personal problem that I find. I don't know whether it is my team per se, or is it culture, because Asians don't like rocking the boat, right? So I'm just going to answer this one quick question. What it boils down to is that I made this mistake many times in the last 2 years, and I am myself still learning from it as well. But what it boils down to is comfort. Are you placing them on the spot because you want an answer out of them, or are you giving them the best possible space with which to answer you to? Now, when you're in a group meeting, as long as there's more than 2 people, right, you have an audience. Some people are naturally shy. So there are a few things that I usually like to do, is that now I ask them to think about things that they want to say. If they want, they can say it before the meeting, privately. And then I go, okay, so this was said. So that means I remove the person from the conversation, the idea and the person, I'm separating them. So that means if they have an opinion or thought, right, no one can attack them for it, because they can only attack the idea because all they have is the idea. Right? That's number one. Number two, think about also the space in which you are having this conversation. If they are not relaxed, they're not going to talk. So that means, step aside, slow down a little bit. Yeah? And if they already are if they're already feeling attacked, right, stop pushing. Right? Because that actually makes them retreat even more. The other way you can do it is make it more conversational, right? And then, have a chat about it versus. So you're talking about. Here's one thing I learned is that not everyone's going to think as fast as you. This is the mistake that I always make. I come from an advertising background, so my mentality is that if I go into a room with 10 ideas, chances are 9 will get shot down, and I'm okay with that. But when you're talking to a lot of other people, that's really not the case. Sometimes they need time to process and then come back to you with an answer. So leave that open to them. You tell them that after this meeting, if you have anything else to add, later today, we'll do a catch-up after you thought about it, and then you give me a response then. You need to give them time to process. Not everyone processes things as fast as you. And I'm guessing your company owner, company manager, that kind of thing, right? You are trained to think quickly. Not everyone is. Don't assume. Empathy is a big part of it. All right? If that's the case, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian.